The question is, how did the Heidelberg Catechism deal with the division in the 1500s? Why is there so much emphasis on the goodness of God? And how does that resolve division? As with many other times in Christian history, division arose within the Church, and a document was written to help clarify belief. During the time of the Heidelberg Catechism, the Protestant Reformation was underway. This catechism was written to define what it means to practice Christianity by the Protestant understanding. As Know the Creeds and Councils explained on pages 113 and 114, the Protestant reformers attempted to define Christianity under the five solas: sola scriptura, sola fide, sola gratia, solus Christus, and soli Deo gloria. Scripture alone, saved by grace alone through faith alone, Christ alone, and glory of God alone. These were the basic tenets of Protestant Christianity that the Reformers wished to identify to the people. While there were varying divisions surrounding the Heidelberg Catechism between the Roman Catholic Church and Protestantism, there was one major conflict that arose within the Protestant Church itself. Know the Creeds and Councils explains it on page 114. The conflict was surrounding Christ being present in the sacrament of the Lord's Supper. There were three main parties of belief: the Lutherans, who believed that Christ's body was actually present in the bread and wine; the Zwinglians, who believed that the Lord's Supper is really just a symbol in remembering Christ's sacrifice; and the Calvinists, who believed that Christ is present in spirit only. My approach to disagreements like this would go along the lines of, let's just try to agree on what we can. Ultimately, this problem is not necessary for salvation, so let's just agree to disagree. Know the Creeds and Councils stated that this was very difficult because of religion being very closely tied to politics. The Heidelberg Catechism was a huge step in the direction of providing a unified confession of faith for a newly formed Protestant church, as is stated on page 115 of the book. The book goes on to say that it was also meant to bring together the various strands of the Reformation that disagreed sharply at significant points of doctrine. Ultimately, the Catechism was written to lead to salvation, found on page 116 of Know the Creeds and Councils. While division was being addressed, there was also a focus on God's goodness, so as to point people in the proper direction. As believers, we disagree on so many things, but we must not lose focus on what the most important thing, which is who God is in relation to who we are supposed to be. Perhaps the emphasis on God's goodness was to remind the people that human debates are nothing compared to divine decrees, as is alluded to on page 116 of the book. Perhaps it was to remind the people that major issues relating to salvation must be agreed upon, but all other issues are for personal conviction, as is stated on page 118. So I would say this emphasis on God's goodness would be a good solution to the division problem. The Heidelberg Catechism is a great reminder that we need to emphasize the things that are clearly written in Scripture, specifically who God is and his instructions he laid down for us through a relationship with Jesus Christ. All other issues, if not recorded specifically in Scripture, should not be so debated that we cause harmful division within the church body. This side of heaven, some things we may never fully know. What we do know, however, is that God is a good God who revealed himself and what he wants to know for life and what he wants us to know for life and godliness within his word. This is what we must live by.